Hello, I'm Kaiser and welcome to Moose Reads. Before I get started, I want to say that the opinions that I give here are my own opinions. They are extremely subjective. If I dislike a book, it is not a reflection on the author and it is not a reflection on people who do like it. Different people have different tastes, and that's okay. Today, I will be reviewing The Truth About Dukes by Grace Burrows. This is the fifth book in the Rogues to Riches series. It is a Regency romance. The description says, Robert Rothmere is hiding a past no duke should have endured, but he's not hiding it well enough. Sooner or later, his enemies will learn that he spent years locked away at a private asylum. To get their hands on his wealth, they'll try to send him right back to his worst nightmares. If Robert is to foil their schemes, he needs to marry a perfectly proper, blessedly boring, deadly dull duchess. Immediately. And he knows exactly which quietly delightful lady he'd love to entrust with that role. Lady Constance Wentworth has cultivated a reputation for utter forgettability. She never speaks out of turn, in public, never has a daring thought, that she admits aloud, and never comes close to courting scandal, as far as anybody knows. Her path crossed Robert's years ago, though, and she's never forgotten the extraordinary lengths he traveled to keep her safe when she hadn't a friend in the world. She longs to be his demure duchess, but little does he know that to marry her would be utter madness. 4 stars, though this one is pushing 5. This book has the same content warnings as the previous one: child abuse, forced committal, and medical abuse. I picked this up at a used bookstore. I remembered reading the first book, didn't remember being quite so put off by the ending, and thought that they were more or less standalones. So seeing a book by one of my favorite authors for like $4, I picked it up. I very quickly learned that they were not standalones. In fact, while I said in a previous review that most of this series is walking a fine line between continuity and standalone, this book is absolutely an exception. The Truth About Dukes is so closely tied to a duke by any other name that they technically overlap. The opening scene here takes place at Althea's ball. So once I started reading this on its own, it quickly became apparent that I needed to go back and start from the beginning. Still, I'm very glad I picked this one up. Constance isn't my favorite of the heroines in this series, but I'm rather fond of Robert, and I absolutely adore their relationship. They met a long time ago, when Quinn was just establishing himself as a successful banker, and Constance had gone from desperate gutter rat to genteel lady rather quickly. Such a sudden change in circumstances is bound to come with some growing pains, and Althea eventually ran away. She ended up getting a job at the asylum where Robert was imprisoned. The description for this book says that Robert went to great lengths to protect Constance while she was there, but it honestly went both ways. They very much saved each other at a time when both of them were most vulnerable, and that's a relationship I go nuts for. At the end of the last book, Nathaniel realized that he could just say he only recently discovered Robert was alive, because their aunt assumed that when she saw him. I'm pretty sure this book adds in that said aunt once saw Robert and Nathaniel's father have a seizure, which proves a duke can have seizures and still be a duke. But even if it's possible, that doesn't mean it'll be easy. Most of this book revolves around dealing with Robert's problem. He's trying to be a proper duke, but it's only a matter of time before someone claims he isn't fit for the title. There's a very unpleasant note at the beginning of this book about terms and accuracy that explains that literally anyone could accuse someone of being mentally incompetent, and it would be decided in court, no doctors required. So yeah, it's going to be a problem. It's especially going to be a problem because the antagonist from the last book is still spoiling for a fight. She wasn't happy about Althea supplanting her position, and she's even less happy about her sister ranking higher still. She puts her husband up to messing with Robert, and while he's reluctant at first, once he sees Robert have a seizure in the street, he sees an opportunity. He convinces a friend to submit a petition to the court to declare Robert incompetent and name him as his guardian. While that is the bulk of this book, this one, like the one before it, has 2 plot lines. Unfortunately, I don't think this book balances them well. Constance is running the dark secret plotline in this book, and I just didn't feel like it had enough room to breathe. However, that's spoilers, so if you don't like spoilers, now is the time to pause or close the video. For everyone else, let's talk details. Constance got pregnant. That seemed fairly obvious to me, but it is still a spoiler. New to society, she fell in with an asshole who fooled around with her and led her on while looking down on her as gutter trash. When she gets pregnant, he drops her like a rock. For reasons I didn't entirely understand, she didn't feel like she could talk to her family about this, so she ran away. Quinn pissed me off in the first book, but aside from that one major failing, he generally seemed like a good guy. This book, however, makes me think even less of him. Eventually, worried about her, and having seen an ad Quinn took out in the paper looking for her, Robert wrote a letter telling him where to find Constance. When Quinn comes to get her, he hides her away and arranges for a couple to take her child once it's born. That would all be fine, except it becomes very clear that he never stopped to ask Constance if that's what she wanted. As soon as she started having pin money of her own to spend as she pleased, she started trying to find her daughter, and, of course, by the end of this book, she finds her. The trouble is that we don't officially learn that she has a daughter until about halfway through the book. It takes longer still for her to be located, and then her current guardian is preparing to move to Australia and take her with him. He's a clergyman, and he's extremely inflexible. He's the kind of religious that gets offended by churches that spend a lot of money on decorations and fancy candle holders, or whatever, which I can get behind. But it also means he's not that fond of wealthy peers who are in favor of such frivolity. And obviously, he doesn't have a good opinion of a woman who had a child out of wedlock. With all of that, Constance barely has a chance to meet her daughter before the book is over. This is actually a complaint I have often with romances involving lost or estranged children. It seems pretty common that they're introduced too late in the story to have any real presence, and then I feel like the resolution is lacking. It's a romance, it's supposed to be about the couple, so these kinds of plots are mostly just background noise. But I'd honestly prefer authors leave these plots out entirely if they're going to half-ass them. In this case, Burrows seemed so uninterested in Constance's daughter that she will never be mentioned again outside of explaining how Stephen met his lady in the next book. Still, rushed reunion aside, I really enjoyed this book. I particularly enjoyed how they resolved Robert's problem. Robert has a seizure during his trial, and that always leaves him a bit muddled for a while after. They try to stall, but he gets called to the stand too soon, and they ask him several basic questions to prove he isn't competent. Things like, who's the king and what day it is. Robert manages to remember the king is George, but when questioned about which George, he struggles to come up with George IV. And he can narrow down the day to one of two, but he's unwilling to guess. It doesn't look good for him. In order to lessen the impact of this poor showing, Stephen gets the proposed guardian extremely drunk when they break for lunch. He's fooled the man into thinking he's betraying his sister and her husband, so the guy trusts Stephen. And then they call him to the stand and ask him the same questions. When the respected lawyer is less capable of answering these same questions, it's pretty hard to make the case that Robert is somehow less competent than any other guy. That's all I have to say about The Truth About Dukes. If you like this video, I hope you'll watch more in the future. Thanks for watching this one. Bye.